This is the Working in Hell podcast with your host, Vinny Blasio. Each episode, Vinny takes you inside the world of New York State Corrections, focusing on both corrections officer and law enforcement issues. And now your host, Vinny Blasio.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Vinny Blasio, and I'm your host of the Working in Hell podcast. So today we have a lot of great information that's going to be coming out today. So we're going to start a little different than what we're used to. We're going to go into some of the news that's been hitting the airwaves lately. And if you don't follow me on Facebook, you can go to Working in Hell, the group page there. There's Vinny News. That has most of the up-to-date. That is a private group, so you will have to be verified before entering, although there are quite a few people that follow me there. And then also on X, formerly Twitter, at Vinny Blasio. So some of this news you may have already seen before, as it's been posted in a lot of these groups. But there's one that just came out that just hit the wire. So let's start off a little different. Like I said, let's go into some of the news. Let me pull that up for you. All right. So the first article that we found this just came out on the wire. Now, this is something that was released by Nice Koba. I believe this is released from the Western Region Vice President. Violence continues at 5 Points Correctional Facility. 9 officers injured, 1 sustains broken nose. For release, it's dated October 31st, 2024. 9 officers were injured during 7 incidents over a 2.5-week period, which included multiple assaults on staff by inmates who have served numerous prison stints at maximum security correctional facility. On Friday, September 27th, 1 officer sustained an injury to his chest when an inmate struck the officer after attacking another inmate inside a cell. Initially, the inmate, who served 2 previous stints in prison, was being escorted to a new cell. When the inmate entered the cell, he attacked the other inmate inside. Ignoring several orders to stop, the inmate continued the attack. The other inmate ran out of the cell into the recreation pen to get away from the attack. The first inmate then turned and lunged at the officer. The officer immediately placed him in body hold and forced him to the floor. On the floor, and still combative, the inmate kicked the officer in the chest, knocking him backward. A second officer responded, and the 2 officers were able to subdue the inmate and apply handcuffs. On the escort to a special housing unit, the inmate became combative again and began banging his head on the wall. Officers forced him to the floor again. Once on the ground, he became compliant. The injured officer was treated by medical staff at the facility and remained on duty. On Wednesday, October 2nd, 1 officer was injured when an inmate punched the officer in the chest after being ordered to lock into his cell. The inmate refused the order and turned and punched the officer in the chest. The second officer assisted in placing the inmate in a body hold, forcing him to the ground where he remained combative. Once handcuffs were applied, the inmate became compliant. 1 officer sustained a knee injury, subduing the inmate. He was treated at the facility and remained on duty. On Friday, October 4th, an inmate needed to be transported to a local hospital after being revived by staff with Narcan. Initially, staff were distributing medication when they observed 1 inmate having a seizure and became unresponsive. Narcan was administered and the inmate became alert and conscious. After being brought to the infirmary, the inmate became combative and began spitting at staff and attempted to bite 1 officer. Once the inmate was subdued, he was transported to Cayuga Medical Center for further treatment. On Monday, October 7th, 2 officers sustained injuries, breaking up 2 inmates who began fighting in the mess hall. After ignoring orders to stop fighting, OC spray was administered with no effect. Body holds were used on the inmates, and they were forced to the floor. 1 inmate became compliant, while the other inmate continued the attack. Once handcuffs were applied, both inmates were escorted from the mess hall. 1 officer sustained elbow and ankle injuries. The second officer sustained a laceration to his hand. Both officers were treated at the facility and remained on duty. On Thursday, October 7th, an officer sustained a broken nose when an inmate who was serving his second stint in prison for manslaughter attacked staff during a pat frisk. Initially, the inmate was ordered to submit a pat frisk outside his cell. When his cell door was opened, the inmate punched 1 officer in the face. A second officer responded and was punched in the face and nose as well. 2 additional officers arrived, and the inmate was forced to the floor and placed in handcuffs. Once in handcuffs, the inmate became compliant. The first officer sustained a back injury and pain to his face. He was treated and remained on duty. The second officer sustained a fractured nose and was treated at Geneva Hospital. On Thursday, October 10th, 2 officers sustained knee and elbow injuries after an inmate attacked them during a pat frisk outside of the mess hall. Initially, the inmate refused to submit to the pat frisk and was forced to the ground when he became combative. The officers quickly subdued the inmate, and he became compliant. Both officers were treated at the facility and remained on duty. On Tuesday, October 15th, 1 officer sustained a shoulder injury when 3 inmates began fighting inside a classroom. Initially, one of the inmates was being escorted into the classroom and was able to slip out of his handcuffs. He began attacking another inmate who was partially restrained in his classroom chair. A third inmate got up from his chair and joined in on the attack. Staff were able to quickly quell the fight and forced all inmates to the ground and placed them back in restraints. 5 Points is quickly becoming the poster child for violence that is plaguing all correctional facilities across New York. The number of violent assaults at 5 Points is mind-blowing with no end in sight. Already short-staffed and pushed to the brink with mandatory overtime, facing a system that is broken, unsustainable, our members are suffering as a result. Even as the governor and the majority of the state legislators remain silent on the issues that our members face daily, we cannot. We will continue to voice what the brave men and women are subjected to daily. The violence that the lawmakers ignore and the forced overtime taking our members away from their families every day so the convicts can watch movies and assault us during the credits. When is enough enough? Stated Kenny Gold, the Western Region Vice President for Knights Cobalt. That I just found online today. That was part of the Newswire. So hopefully that'll be hitting out the media outlets in the next day or two. So as you see, the violence, as we all know, continues to grow inside the correctional setting. We've had just the other day a officer that sustained multiple fractures on a dorm at Green Correctional Facility. He is currently out. He has at least, I believe, 6 to 7 broken orbital socket to his face at the hands of inmates. So when, like it said in that article, I believe, when is enough enough? I mean, when do people that create the environment that's going on today get involved and undo or repair a system that is obviously broken? And that goes to a couple of the news articles that I'm going to read today. Like I said, we're going to change it up a little bit, but it goes to the point. Does anybody care? Does anybody listening? Violence has always occurred in prison and it always will. There's no getting around that. But when you create a more dangerous environment that officers and supervisors and staff, let's not forget there's civilian staff that are in here, not just security, you create a toxic work environment. And then you wonder why nobody wants to take the job or stay on the job. Who the hell is going to want to stay in an environment where you already made a dangerous environment worse? And for that matter, how does this governor of New York State not say or get involved when she's been sent time and time information and does not get involved? She is part of the executive branch. She's in charge of the executive branch, and we're going to get to her in a minute when we get into the poll that we took about Governor Kathy Hochul. And for her just to turn a blind eye is a disgrace to every New Yorker, and especially those that put on the uniform every day and go to work, not to mention the family members that have to suffer. We talked to incident after incident, people getting their fingers bitten off, getting feces and urine thrown at them and other seminal fluids and other items that I'll leave out for now. But when is it going to change? So it brings us to the next incident that happened. Obviously, this was just put out, and that was the assault at Sing Sing. Inmate out of place, running on B block in the gallery, was questioned, pat frisked, and then it was found that he had weapons turned on the officer. One officer was sliced in the neck, in the hand. That information is still forthcoming. So if I get something wrong, I apologize. The other officer, obviously, second officer, sustained injuries to his hand as he had puncture wounds from the weapons. So again, here we are, maximum security prison at Sing Sing, and we have weapons and we have officers getting hurt. There were no repercussions for the inmates, it seems. And we have another one that was in a press release that I took out. So I'll post that for those that are watching it on video. This is the state police. Here we go. Memo or press release that they did, and this is dated October 29, 2024. State police investigate a homicide at a correctional facility at Livingston County. On October 26, 2024, the New York State Police responded to investigate a stabbing that occurred at Groveland Correctional Facility in Livingston County. Subsequent to an altercation, one victim, Rashawn Bell, age 36, was pronounced deceased at the scene. A second victim was transported to Strong Memorial Hospital for non-life-threatening injuries. This is an ongoing investigation. And because that is an ongoing investigation, I'll leave some of the details that I were told out of that, but it still goes to the fact that here you are, there's no repercussions, mostly due to HALT for the inmates. These inmates are acting out, and the very people that HALT was there to, at least on paper, we're told that this is going to protect, are hurting those individuals. So as we see, the HALT Act is a complete failure, has nothing to do with what has been stated in the past, that this is just because it's not implemented correctly. It's just a total BS, codified into law, forced down everybody's throats, never listened to the stakeholders of the people that are actually doing the work. And now, as we've seen, we talked about last podcast or the podcast before, you get into the record number of assaults. And how does nobody pay attention that not only is it a record number of assaults now for staff, it's a record number of assaults for inmates. You can't tell me that the inmate families and people that this inmate was pronounced dead are not going to have a problem. I mean, you're those that you're trying to protect, you're putting in harm's way. You know, we said the gangs would take over the prisons, and that has happened. They're charging for everything. We spoke on that in our earlier podcast, so I'm not going to get into that. But the gangs are running the prisons. So if somebody wants a phone call and you don't want to pay up or get into paying the gangs for doing something or a service, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to take matters into their own hands, and it's a cycle. Then there's retribution. So as we have complained, HALT has unintended consequences as it rewards bad behavior. When gangs run the phones and others cannot use what they should, violence is the way of acting out. No one is safe. It's not safe for inmates, and it's definitely not safe for staff. So again, last week, we'll get into another incident. Allegedly last week at Fishkill at approximately 6:30 p.m., there was a two-man fight on the dorm. The officer pulls the pin. The inmates were both apprehended in the fight. One inmate, while escorted to medical, passes out. Ambulance was called. The inmate was given numerous sprays of Narcan to no effect. Chest compressions ensued by staff. Great job. And then the inmate was in medical distress for unknown reasons and eventually expires. So state police are investigating. So there's no such thing as a normal day, everyone. We all know that these incidents are happening more and more frequently. And, you know, your safety is the utmost importance to all. But that just gives you another incident that's out there. So we just talked about a bunch of incidents right there that's happened in the last week. Really, really distressing. And then you wonder why the New York is headed in the direction that we're going in. Elections have consequences. I'll leave some of my political opinions out, but the elections and those people that supported HALT, some people are supporting again. I can't wrap my head around that. How you would, anybody that put their pen and voted yes on HALT, how you could support them is beyond me. And we'll get to some of that at the end. And we've had some of the guests in the last couple of podcasts that are trying to make a difference and running for different assembly and Senate positions. And we would ask that you support those that support you. And another thing is we look at New York State. New York State leads the country. This is according to the New York Post. Leads the country again when it comes to driving out citizens. Why is that? Bad policy. 2023 saw nearly 1% of the population leave. That's more than 180,000 people. Wake up, New York, but they don't. Politics first, crime, safety, everything is to the wind. and the citizens and the employees are left to pay the price. It's just very disturbing. And also, while we're talking on still in the news cycle here, we have the news story that was put out on Law Enforcement Today, and you can find this story at lawenforcement.com, lawenforcementtoday.com, that we see law enforcement officers face a 54% increase in risk of dying by their own hands. We've had a couple podcasts mentioning the help for officers, and obviously we want mental health addressed and protect the officers and staff and family, as we mentioned in the prior podcast, in the episode, I believe it was 9, talking about the mental health of not just these staff, but their families as well. So this story came out, and I'll just touch on it real quick because it kind of hit home to me. In late 2023, the CNA Corporation began collaborating with a nonprofit organization, First Help, to examine and analyze the data it has amassed on law enforcement and correctional officers' deaths by suicide. This research brief presents analysis of 1,287 deaths by suicide of law enforcement and correction officers from 2016 to 2022, offering descriptive information categorized by the year of occurrence, agency details, geographic location, demographic attributes, position specifics, help-seeking behaviors, life challenges the person encountered before their death, and details about the death event. This article is based on research. A summation is below, and I suggest you read the entire document for a complete analysis. So I love that article, digging deeper. It was something that we talked about before, that not all, when we had the Western New York law enforcement helpline on in the 2 podcasts ago, they talked about this specific statistics, and the statistics are actually lower because not everything can be discussed because of HIPAA, right to privacy, and so not everything is reported. But this really drives it home. And again, that full research and summation can be found at lawenforcementtoday.com for those that want to dig a little deeper. And here is something that a member we're talking about, an officer just earlier last week, about how the detention centers in juvenile is mirroring corrections. And I would almost say that what happened there first, because they dismantled the juvie system first, and the problems that they're seeing. And this was an excellent article that came out from the New York Post, and I'll read that real quick. Well, as quick as I can be because it's rather lengthy, but it mirrors some of the things that are happening in corrections, but gives you the mindset of what's happening in law enforcement. It's really disturbing, but it's really interesting as well. New York City's juvenile detention centers have become overrun madhouses. Sound familiar? Where the worst teen inmates rule thanks to raise the age and other state reforms. Here we are. See a pattern that we're seeing? New York policies. Per last week's harrowing Department of Investigations report, Raise the Age, which requires that 16 and 17-year-old perps be housed in juvenile detention centers, not jail, and lets them stay until they're 21. Combined with bail reforms and condensed the worst of the worst teen offenders into youth facilities, has fundamentally altered the population of 2 juvies, Horizon and Crossroads, with an overload of older detainees facing more serious and violent charges. The facilities are now bursting. Since Raise the Age kicked in, there's been an 880% increase in residents aged 16 to 21 at Horizon, and a 444% increase in residents aged 16 to 21 at Crossroads. The number of inmates booked on murder charges more than quadrupled. Let me say that again. The number of inmates booked on murder charges more than quadrupled. Amazing. And the older, larger, more dangerous population is completely bulldozing staff. Sound familiar? Nearly every staff member with whom the DOI spoke consistently stated in substance that the Administration for Children's Services was ill-prepared for the new demographics of Raise the Age population, particularly the residents' age, physical size, and violent criminal history. Sounds something that maybe you could substitute, take out the word of Administration for Children's Services and put in the Administration for Docs. And so the residents run the facility. Bingo. The culture of out-of-control violence includes a case where 2 inmates attacked a third resident with a razor blade, and another where an inmate repeatedly punched a staffer in the head and put their arms around his neck. Most damning, after an incident where a resident slashed an employee, staff reported hearing the resident say, cutting season on staff has just begun, and we are 17, so nothing will happen. So imagine that. Imagine working in that environment. Wait, you do, because that's how the inmates feel the same way in docks. There's no repercussions. What is going to happen? No consequences. It's just amazing. This is straight from the horse's mouth. Dangerous perps know they'll skate no matter what terror they unleash. Any difference between juvie and docks? Because I hear that same mantra almost daily. Utterly laughable. Now get this, because this strikes a nerve as well. Utterly laughable disciplinary policies make it worse. Docs, do we even have disciplinary policies? I don't think so. When violence or misconduct broke out, ACS responds that the least intrusive and least restrictive intervention necessary. Remember those words before? Including non-physical tactics, which include nonverbal communication, paraverbal communication, 1, 2, 3 active listening, and verbal intervention. Methods more suited to a shrub-faced preschoolers than law-breaking teens. Well, you just substitute teens and put in adults, and here we have the Department of Corrections at today's day and age. DOI mildly terms these methods insufficient to maintaining order in the facility. The state flooded juvies with teen murder suspects and expected the staff to gentle parent them into being well-adjusted, stand-up citizens. The ACS also employed a point system, Strive, to reward good behavior and punish bad behavior. Sound like the pizza parties that Commissioner Marticello instituted throughout docks for behavior? What happened? You gave them pizza parties and the assaults skyrocketed. Good job. How'd that work out? Well, one teen flipped out over not receiving Strive points and punched a staff member in the face, chest, and abdomen. The DOI's 15 recommendations include stronger disciplinary methods and weapons defense training and self-defense training for staff. Reported assaults have gone down since some of these reforms have been implemented. But there's only one true long-term fix. Violent older teens need to be separated from the rest of youth detainee population. Let me say that again. There's only one true long-term fix. Violent older teens need to be separated from the rest of the youth detainee population. That was raise the age that caused that. Halt, cause. You cannot separate these. They're going right back out to general population. The same problem. And they plainly shouldn't be allowed to squat in youth detention until they're 21. Repeal or at least repair, raise the age. Amen. And the same could be said. I did a lot of comparisons with that. Unfair to those that are working the juvies, but to the docks facilities and the HALT Act. But the same thing should be said there. Repair or repeal the HALT Act. And the same, repeal or at least repair, raise the age. These policies are not working. Statistic after statistic is proving this. Sooner or later, as it's been said many times, someone is going to die. We've seen the inmates, how many just died this week. It's happening to them. So it's just a matter of when that happens to, unfortunately, a staff member. And let's hope and pray. I hope that never happens. But we see the direction and the care that this governor and the Department of Corrections is taking, and that is they do not care. They do not care. All they care about is having their pizza parties for the inmates while staff pays the price. Here's another one of, well, we get on to docs, as everybody knows. I just recently put that on one of the Facebook groups as far as I was never for in the combination and merging of docs and parole. I wrote a lengthy paper about that. I also wrote letters to the editor and opinion pieces on how the parole and docs merger should have never happened to begin with. But here we go. We'll talk this is from Rochester first. Parolee arrested, accused of choking a woman in Rochester General Hospital parking lot, from James Battaglia, Rochester, New York. A parolee was arrested Monday after investigators said he beat and choked a woman in a hospital parking lot, stole her car, led police on a chase, and tried to run over New York State troopers. Isaiah Weathers, 34, was charged with robbery, assault, grand larceny, reckless endangerment, and criminal obstruction of breathing. Weathers was released 10 days ago on parole for robbery and other charges relating from a carjacking from 2013, according to the police. Police were called to Rochester General Hospital around 9:30 a.m. for a report of a robbery in the parking garage. According to investigators, a woman said she was sitting in her Kia when someone approached and demanded she get out of the car. Police said Weathers hit and choked her for several minutes before she was able to get away. The suspect then left her vehicle. Police saw the car near Lake Avenue at Britton Street and tried to pull it over, but Weathers allegedly wouldn't stop, so police chased him. They said he drove directly at New York State troopers who were setting up spike strips on the Lake Avenue near Pearson Street. The Kia eventually stopped on Riverview Heights, where police say Weathers ran away on foot. A police canine found him hiding in a backyard. And found him hiding in the backyard. So there we go. Another parolee, another one that should have been behind bars. And here we go. It's just the news cycle day after day, as we read, is just not stopping with the crime news, whether it be parolees, whether it be juveniles, whether it be docs, whether it be soft on crime policies, bail reform. You have it. We can run the gamut. We can talk to it, and we have till we're blue in the face. But when is enough going to change? When is enough people, or enough, whether it be citizens, inmates, juvies, whether citizens, when are enough people going to be victimized and hurt before the system has to change? And I just can't wrap my head around it. And this will get into the next area where I posted this on various social media groups, because I wanted to get an idea, a snapshot of what the current employees, some are retired, most of them are active, citizens and families, of what they thought about the current state of affairs into the governor. So for those that are on the video of the podcast, this week's poll, and I started this on October 24, 2024, this information will be used for this week's podcast. And here was the poll. New York DOCCS is an executive branch agency, and as such, falls under the governor of New York's leadership and responsibility. And here was the question. Do you believe Governor Hochul cares for and has the best interest of her DOC's employees? And the poll was given two choices. The first choice was yes, Governor Hochul is a proven leader and cares for her DOC's employees. And then there was the vote for no. No, Governor Hochul was shown that she does not care for the health and safety of her DOC's employees. The vote sample poll, there was not one vote for yes, but later this morning after I checked, I do have to say there was one vote in one of the groups. So there was one. So I have to revise that. So what does that say about what DOC's employees think, the general public and retirees, but most importantly, those that are still working? And this included civilian staff. I will put that in there too. So the majority, almost 99.9%, believe that no, Governor Hochul has shown that she does not care for the health and safety of her DOC's employees. This wasn't slanted. This wasn't interjecting. This was a straight up poll, and overwhelmingly, nobody has faith in this governor. And as we've seen before from the petitions that were out there, we know that people feel the same way about the current commissioner of DOCs. Not everything is DOC's fault. They certainly, between the threats of the commissioner that came out of his mouth, he's certainly not advocating for the officers or trying to effectuate any change. But in this poll, for the sake of argument, because we'll get into the commissioner in a minute with the second, I have the poll results from the survey results that I sent out and received overwhelmingly message on that. But we'll get to that in 1 second. But this week's poll, and we'll have another one out next week, is about the governor. Do you believe Governor Hochul cares for and has the best interest of her DOC's employees? Nothing slanted there, no tricky questions to get you a gotcha moment. And overwhelmingly, 1,201 surveyed said no, or took the poll. No, Governor Hochul has shown that she does not care for the health and safety of her DOC's employees. It shouldn't shock anybody, because everyone that I talked to, they were shocked that there was even one yes vote. But be that as it may, there is. And here we are again. It's like, I just don't get where the governor just turns her back to employees. Doesn't matter if it's corrections or who it is, but not to get involved when the complaints, the news articles, the information that's been given to her. We gave her the petition that we've been asking for everyone to sign for the last 2 months. That has been delivered to her more than once. We've heard nothing back from her. This governor just does not listen. She doesn't care. She doesn't listen. And I don't know how else to put it. Obviously, I've tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but there is no way that she does not hear all the many voices that have been sending her the information that's been out there, whether it be on social media, been on the governor's own Twitter feed, been on Facebook. It's been on direct contact forms to the governor that people have copied and pasted and shown. She's getting many messages. So to say that she doesn't know is being naive and putting your head buried way up in the sand and pretending like this governor is actually going to do something. And it's her criminal justice policies are just not going to change. And I don't know how else to say it. When we have a staffing crisis going on that docs created themselves, and you have these criminal justice policies, how does anyone want to stay on the job? And I've talked to most, and from everything that I've talked to, most people don't. So, and then we'll get back to before we get on to the survey results, because it's a direct reflection on the commissioner. It's like, so when I was doing the survey, it was unique because I got this question. And so I did a little digging. I mean, there was obviously a news story by New York Focus about the whole Marticello Mafia, about how many people and the nepotism that is going on. Now, this was obviously before that article broke. That was before Mr. Marticello was confirmed as commissioner. So, but when you look at this, and this is directly from See Through New York, you know, I don't know who all these people are. I'll be the first one. I do know who the majority of them are. But when you look at all these people, you know, they're not just in docs, they're all across the New York State with the same last name. But we do know that at least those that are in docs, we have $1 million of payroll right here just with the Marticello name. 2023. And obviously it's going to be higher this year. And some of those people have been promoted since this 2023, including Mr. Daniel Marticello III. So that was when he was acting or associate commissioner, and now he's commissioner. So that price tag has changed. But take the price tag out of it. Look at that. 2023, we have 11 results with the name of Marticello for a $1.2 million price tag per year, not including, that's just salary. That's not including benefits or anything else. Like I said, some of these people I don't know. So not trying to put anybody's personal information out there, because this is a public record. This is done by See Through New York. So you can put in the last name and see that for yourself. And that's through seethroughnewyork.net for those that are on the audio version of the podcast. But the chart that I'm showing here shows that we have Commissioner Marticello, Chris Marticello. Everybody knows who that is. Then we have the sister, Catherine, blah, blah, blah. We go down and down through the different Marticello last name and hierarchy that they have, that basically they control all of docs. So one family, just like a king in his fiefdom, is controlling all of docs, and that comes at a hefty price tag. But even keeping the price tag out of it, this is when I saw that, I'm like, what are they getting at? And they were like, well, you're doing your survey, just look up of how many Marticellos. And I'm like, all right. So I did. And that was a result that I found out. Again, not trying to do anything negative. It doesn't show addresses or anything like that, but it does. That's public information. That's not something I'm doing on my own or trying to cause anything other than one last name seems to be prevalent throughout docs. And New York State, through its own ethic commission, if you read back through there, says that there's not a nepotism problem, or there's no nepotism in New York according to the own ethics policies. Well, I think that document there, and you compare it to previous years, shows that at least there's a Marticello problem. So enough on that. We'll get to the survey, because the survey And I'll put this up for those that are on the video. These results just came in, and the survey asked, there was 2 questions, and we'll break this down. The first question was, what to you is the most important change you would like to see within the New York State Department of Corrections? And the second question was, if you had one question for the commissioner, what would that be? And here are the results, mostly ranked according to the number of responses of the same issue. Some of this is paraphrased, but most of it is, I took wording from the emails, text messages, messengers, and Twitter responses, and personal messages, and those that were also part of Vinny News on Facebook. And this wasn't just, it was on all the groups, the Working in Hell page, and some of those responses are still there. But so let's go down to the first one and let's hit that one. What to you is the most important change that you would like to see within docs? And this really struck me because I didn't know things where I never expected this answer, but the number one answer was training more at the academy and service. We'd like to see cell extractions, hands-on, etc. Now, this was the number one issue. Never did I feel that training would be a number one issue. I figured that there would be lots of other things, mandates, policies, and oddly enough, that throughout the survey that came up, but it wasn't prevalent as some of this. To most people feel that training, they'd like to see cell extraction training because they want to be trained on how to do it, so it's within docs policies. And that really offsets another one, because in some of the other responses, the officers said they were afraid to do their job for fear of discipline, and that was down the line in number 7. But when you talk about the training, the officers, at least according to the survey here, a small snapshot of it, I agree, this wasn't sent out to everyone. There's those that follow me and those that responded. But it was unique to see that training, people wanted to be trained in cell extractions and hands-on. What do you want me to do? Train me in how you want it, not how I think I should do it. Train me in how you want it so I don't get in trouble. That was number one. I was just really blown away by that. And then also the training, a lot of answers got into about the academy. They want to see stronger people and stronger people coming out of the academy. There's been all kinds of complaints. Some of the messages came out that, officers were on OJT, they blah, blah, blah. And a lot of complaints about the newer staff. And it's up to the training officers to get them ready for OJT. Then once at OJT, it's up to you and I, everybody that, well, not myself, but anybody that's still working, to pull these people up by their bootstraps and let them. And as we know, there's still going to be a lot of people that drop out after OJT. The job isn't for everyone, but you try to give them and teach them the best tools they have. And I'm not going to get into some of the caveats of people that were saying about new recruits and this and that, but there does seem to be a different mindset from the time that I was in the academy to the new generation that's coming out today. Not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying things have changed. And obviously the training that I took is not the same training. It's completely different. Some of it's more into verbiage and laws, and other parts are less physical training and PT training, that type of thing. But as we know, things have changed. So the second one on that, again, what to you is the most important change you'd like to see within docs? Officer division. That was 2 and 3. And the reason that I gave that 2 different numbers was because it was the same issue, just how the division is created. Some blamed the state, saying that they're accidentally causing division within because of the mandates. They don't want this officer because he's able to use FMLA. This officer took a full vacation. I got stuck, so I'm pissed off at him because my seniority doesn't allow me to have that particular week off. I have a wedding I can't get to. I'm mandated, blah, blah, blah. So, but the issue was division. Some of it was internal division between officer and officer. And we've seen the other part of the division, which was caused, they thought, directly by the state. So that's why I broke that up into 2 and 3. And as we know that, you can't get 2 officers to agree, like I said, on one of the groups the other day, on what they want on their pizza. So having different ideas and different philosophies isn't going to be changed. But at the end of the day, all you have are each other. So you can't be in this divided philosophy, because if you want to effectuate the change, and I hear it every day, and everyone's hearing it, it's if you want to effectuate that change, then you have to be united and come together on a front. How you go forward with that, listening to different ideas, is the way to go, in my opinion, because if you keep hearing everything inside the same thing over and over again in an echo chamber, you're never going to grow, you're never going to learn, and you're never good. The best part is I always want to hear what the other side is saying, because I want to know, one, how I can fight that if I don't agree with it, and two, to see if there's anything there that maybe would better my knowledge. So, but anyway, officer division number two, was not shocked to see the officer division. You can see that all over the social media sites, everywhere, the officers, because of the environment that they're in. But at the end of the day, nobody else is there to support you. It's scary. It's scary times to be inside of a prison, and you are all each other have. So that is, if you want to take anything out of that to me is the best part of advice. Number four is they hear more on social media than we ever hear from the lineup or a facility. And that is true. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of people that give me information, provide me reports, talk about this. Why aren't we hearing anything? Obviously, some instances you can't put out things. I understand that for obvious reasons. I won't get into that. But before, I always remembered, and when I was conducting lineup, I always wanted to make sure that if something came across my watch commander's email, I would go to the captain. Can we inform the troops about this? X, Y, and Z. Something happened. We want to make sure that same incident or that same synopsis does not happen at our facility. And I think Docs has kind of got away from that. The early warning system, to me, was a big thing for those that are in CIU, because the officers that are working and hearing the information firsthand, that's another thing, but that's totally off topic. But when you hear about an incident on Facebook, and we all know in the instant days of information that's going to happen, like I told you about the scenario where I'm hearing it on a scanner for facility X. Facility X didn't even inform the command center yet, but I'm hearing it live on the scanner. And yeah, I put that out there. I will put the information out there, good, bad, or indifferent. Doesn't make me always 100% right. Doesn't mean that there's not more to the story, because as we know, there usually is. But the information is not shared, and that's a shame, especially when you're trying to have a game plan of educating the public right now of how bad things are, and to keep that bottled up, I think does everybody a disservice. And for Docs not to share that with other facilities and how things are going through. As we all know, drugs, there's no penalty anymore, but drugs are rampant in the facility, and every day finding those, that should be shared almost daily. And if that's a shame too. But the major incidents that happen across the facility, at different facilities, should be served, so people know that their brothers and sisters that are working at Sing Sing know that the same person that's working at Green Correctional knows what's going on. And a lot of times we hear it. I said this before in a podcast. We hear it from the inmates. The inmates get transferred out because of an incident, and word travels through the inmates. That's not always correct either, but that does happen. So number 5 was, we feel like a line item number and local administrations are out for themselves and could not care less about the staff. Received a lot of complaints about local administrations. Some facilities said how great their local administrations are and how they work with them. And that's great too. We'd like to see all facilities work with that. But a lot of them felt that they were more of out to hurt the officers and not help. So that was a little disheartening to see that. And obviously people do feel like they're a line number. The frustrations are deep. Everybody feels like they are not cared about when nobody's listening. We've seen some superintendents and administrations go to the hospitals when officers are hurt. And we've seen other administrations where they just cared more about staying at a fair and not giving up their personal time to go see them. So, that goes both ways. Number 6 was Docs is out of touch with security staff needs and pressures. That we hear echo everywhere. If the Docs doesn't hear that every day, I'm shocked, because they are out of touch with the officers and frontline staff. And we've had civilians that are on here speaking the same thing. So we can see that that's a problem. Number 7, I touched on that earlier. Officers are afraid of doing their jobs for fear of discipline. Doc's discipline is backwards. We all know, unlike other agencies. And I'm working with another one now. For those that don't know, I let that out. You know, Docs does it backwards. You're guilty until proven innocent. Bullshit. You know, you have less rights in prison than the convicts. And when it comes to discipline, whether it's internal, external, or something, you're looked at. You could beat the charge on this on the street, but Docs looks at it as you're guilty before. In the disciplinary system, we've said it before. Some changes have been made, some for the better, some not. But the disciplinary for system in Docs always looks as if you're guilty, and you're not. So I understand, and people are afraid. I don't want to do that because I may get disciplined. And what that does is it places other officers in harm's way, because now when you can't do your job or you're afraid to do that job, that's going to put somebody else in jeopardy. And that goes both for inmates and officers. You know, who's protecting the inmates? The officers are. And if they're afraid to do their job, how can the inmates get protected? So it's a slope. And I think you'll see lawsuits come out on inmates because they know that the inmates cannot even be protected at this point. And we have seen some of that. Now I'll leave that subject alone because I was contacted in regards to that, and that is a problem. Officers are no longer see the need for misbehavior reports. They have given up. Yeah, they're like, nothing's going to happen to them. There's no disciplinary process. Nothing is going to happen. So why should I write an infraction? If nothing is going to happen, I don't agree with that philosophy, but I understand it. It's like nothing is going to happen. Why am I taking my time and energy when nothing happens anyway? I understand it. I get the frustration loud and clear. Officers, we are alone. We're all we have. I touched on that. I said that myself. That is true. And number 10, stop programming when you don't have the bodies. And that came up a lot, different ways that it was said, but because of the staffing problem and people, the facilities not having the manpower that they need, they stop programming. Safety should come first. Safety for the officers to get back to their family. Programming should be second. And the programming for HALT, they made that law. If there's not enough officers to do that, then that should be looked at immediately. And why that isn't addressed, I don't know. Other responses, the state or the union should sue the state for unsafe working conditions. I try to stay away from the union stuff, as I was once a union official and I'm working with another union. So I try to stay away from that so there's not a conflict of interest. But yeah, unsafe working conditions, to be sure. Females frisking males against objection. This came up a lot. Somebody put out a new post this morning that I saw, and that's mostly in the female facilities where you have male inmates that identify as a female, and the females don't want to be looking at a male body part. So the other part is part of the contract. Double time is still not coded in the computer, and we're still having issues, even after memos stated that it was clarified and it will be paid. Whether that's because of lag or there's still an ongoing problem, the double time question came up a lot. So those are the questions from 1, and we'll get to the second part before we wrap up here. Now, this was question 2, and this was mostly in regards to the commissioner. The same, put that up. This is going to be a little harder for you to see because this was a lot more. Question 2, if you had one question for the commissioner, what would it be? And the first one summed it up purposely, really well, is my question to the commissioner would be, why do you value a convicted felon's life to be more valuable than your law-abiding staff's lives? I know that inmates have always had more rights than staff, but with everything going on inside those walls and fences, things have gone way too far to the inmates. I say stop catering to the inmates and their families and start taking care of the people who staff your facilities and their families. So that inmates, the question that came up the most, I used that summation because that was a direct quote from someone. But the thing was, inmates have more rights than staff. And we have said that all along continuously. And it's been an ongoing problem for years. And since HALT, it's just exasperated the situation. And it's getting more and more intense because, everybody wants the inmates treated fairly. Everybody wants the inmates to go, not to be involved in these incidents. But when you've created an atmosphere that there is no reprisals for the inmates hurting inmates or officers, yeah. And when you see that there's no discipline anymore, yeah, the inmates have more rights. And we see all the advocates that are out there for the inmates. And when you don't see the same level of high pressure advocacy for the officers, people are frustrated. So I get that. And I agree with that. And I don't know why that is. I think there needs to be more people, not just myself, that are advocating, besides those that are paid to advocate for you. Number second, we get into, I thought would have came on the question number one, but here we are asking the commissioner, why do you feel it is okay to mandate staff 24 hours and on RDOs? Great question. And the commissioner, just for open transparency, I invited him on the podcast. Obviously, I never expected that he would answer or say yes, but at least that way you could get it scripted or unscripted. I gave him the idea of doing it either way. And obviously he declined my request, or just, I won't even say he declined it, he just didn't answer, which I didn't think he would, but I wanted to extend him the courtesy. And I did share that email with those that are on the social media groups. So anybody that wants to see that, I can certainly share that with you as well. But for time, we'll leave that alone because I don't think I have that here. So the question, why do you feel it's okay to nobody should be working 24-hour shifts. Unless it's an extreme emergency, a riot, if something happens on a trip, there shouldn't be. Staffing is no longer an emergency when it's been going on for years and you can't do anything about it. So that's not. Why is it okay? This is number three to the commissioner. Why is it okay for you to go home and staff suffer from burnout and have zero work-life balance? That came up a lot. The same thing with the facility administrators locally. You go home, you work 4 to 5 days a week, and we have to bear the brunt of working 16-hour shifts. You don't see a superintendent getting mandated, and I get that. I understand that. So why is it okay for you to go home and the staff suffer from burnout and have zero work-life balance, especially family? Family should always come first, and no job is worth your health or your family. Zero job is worth that. So the other one is number 4, stop the threat of more closures, and you keep hanging that over our heads. Why is that a good tool to threaten staff? We've mentioned that more times than I can shake a stick at. This commissioner gets more out of his employees, he feels, not agreeing with it by any sense of the imagination, by threats. He lives on threats. That's an antiquated way of docs. We're going to threaten you, same with discipline. And he just figures that we're going to get more out of threatening staff to encourage staffing. So by his threat of hanging the jails over your head, if staffing doesn't improve, we're going to close 3 more jails. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, how's it going to pick up with your nonsense policies? And you're the one, and when you were the director of personnel, you solved the problem. You've had every title from docs all the way up, so you bear that burden, and you should also bear that responsibility when it doesn't happen. So it's just a threat that doesn't need to be there, and I was happy to see that came up. And I didn't expect it to see it at number 4 though. Number 5, management is out of touch with the staff needs. We've seen that kind of coalesce between the two questions, 1 and 2. Management doesn't feels out of touch with the employees, or at least the employees feel that management is out of touch. I would agree with that in most facilities. Their hands are tied. Not every superintendent is a bad superintendent. I speak to some, and they're great people. Their hands are tied to a degree. But if they're not getting support from Building 4, then you can't necessarily blame them in every circumstance. But I would agree that docs is out of touch. They just refuse to listen. Some of that is not their own fault when you're getting legislative laws thrown at you, but they could do a much better job advocating for their employees, and they just don't. They'd rather, hang on the legislators' mantra than actually help the employees. And that's a problem when you have a commissioner or a boss that doesn't listen to its employees. And I get that he's caught between two, but when you don't take those considerations back, that's a recipe for disaster. And he definitely is out of touch with frontline staff. How anybody can be a part of his mantra and be, hanging on him and think they're doing a stroke of business is beyond me. You showed time and time again just the opposite. So, and number 6 to the commissioner, why do you not focus on both recruitment and retention? People are leaving in high numbers. That came out. We got a lot about what are you doing for recruitment and what are you doing for retention. We've seen the hub hiring as he thinks that's the best avenue, which, so far I think the numbers have improved. But when people are running for the door and resigning, I think the resignations that I just saw for October, and now we have the closures coming in November, there's going to be a lot more. I think the resignations probably directly correlated with the closures or there, but you're not keeping people. So that's a fair question. What are you doing to retain people? And the answer is they don't have a clue what they're doing, so they can't retain and they can't recruit. You have bad policies. Who the hell is going to stick around? So, but that is an excellent question. And I really want to thank everyone that took the time to give me this information. Why do you not focus on recruitment and retention? We touched on that. Can you give the authority back to the officers? Another great one. The officers feel that they are not a touch, that the strike of 79 was a lot to do with taking away the authorities from the officers and giving that to the inmates. And I've touched on that. I wrote an article for Cornell on that, and you can find that in the Cornell reasons for the 1979 strike. Not to get into the striking aspect of it, but when you look at some of these issues, they're the exact same issues. Can you give the authority back to the officers? Yeah, that's an excellent point. And when will you hold inmates accountable? That to me kind of jives one, but they were sent in, so I listed them separately. And why do you not listen to security staff? I think that coalesced earlier with management is out of touch. You're not listening to its employees. And number 10, why not make management of facilities responsible for their decisions and make them take a test to get promoted? They never get into trouble for their bad decisions or misdeeds. And we've seen that a lot. They can say, go work at McDonald's and they can bring down staff morale. But if you and I say something even remotely out of tune to another employee, to a supervisor, or to other staff member, they're quick to discipline you or warn you about that. So those are all good questions on the survey. The other issues that came up, they came up more than once. What will you tell families when a staff member dies or is lost in a riot? I'd like to know that myself. When people are telling you that this is going to happen, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. What will you tell the families? That is good. Wasn't the top 10, but that was there. Another good one was, why do you turn a blind eye to all drugs? It's not safe for the inmates or staff. As you can see, the drugs have skyrocketed. There's no penalties anymore, and that gets into another one as far as scanning the mail and legal mail, so you don't have sprinkles. We'll get into that in a second. But people are just had enough. It's not safe, and you can keep saying it and saying and saying it, but when nobody does any action to change that, that really is frustrating, and the members have had enough. And the other part is inmates are not penalized for the false reports. That was another one. As we know, they make these bogus claims. They're not penalized. Sometimes they make these false complaints. Sometimes they're penalized for that. More often than not, they aren't. This one I thought was unique and good. Protect us, not politicians. Love that. I think that's spot on. Scan mail and legal mail, no sprinkles for the inmates. As you know, that is excellent. For those that don't know what the sprinkles are, that's the synthetic marijuana sprayed onto paper, and they rip it up and make it into sprinkles and smoke that and what have you. Cut the fat at Building 4. If jails close, so should assistant commissioners and support staff. Yeah, as we said, like COBA years ago, I was part of it. We did a whole chart on the bureaucracy at docks. At that time, it was the parking lot contest at Building 2. We did a whole chart in the LOB showing how many assistant commissioners and assistant to the assistant to the assistant. So if you're closing jails, don't you think it's only fair to say, cut these assistants? And if nobody is listening and nobody's doing anything anyway, why do you need all these supervisory positions? So I thought that was good. And the one thing that the survey doesn't say is that everyone that I talked to got feedback from, phone calls and such, they're all feeling defeated. I have gotten a lot of, why do I bother anymore? It's just, this job just isn't worth it. And I understand that frustration. Not saying I agree with it, but I certainly understand it. So that's a lot. We spent the last hour just going through the surveys and the news, which we'll start doing. And I just wanted to close with one thing that I'm working on, so everyone knows. And again, I asked for 2 people out of every facility to help me get word out and share information. So again, contact me and we can start um, getting that. I do get a lot of information every day, and a lot of people have contacted me. But I just want to share this one quick question that I got, and it's Vinny goes, I'm just curious, with all the violence spiking statewide, how much of it is directly related to reclassified, declassified inmates from closures? And we touched on that a couple podcasts ago, that with Great Meadow closing, Sullivan closing, they all of a sudden they were waving a magic wand, and some of these inmates were going from max status to medium status. And as you see from some of these incidences, and I'm trying to correlate and get more information because I like to speak with facts, not just with innuendo. So anybody that knows me, I like to have a pile of paperwork when I can. But this is huge, and I agree with that. And I know the state gave huge time cuts to SHU, RRU, and BHU inmates, and then put them in general pop. We know that did happen for a fact. They also changed some of them from max to medium status. I just spoke on that. And some had mental health status changed from 1s, 2s, in order to put them in population. And that's another one that I've been hearing about. And some of these mediums that are not classified, they're changing their classification just so they can go to a certain facility because they don't have room for them somewhere else. And then what happens? The inmates are involved in an altercation, whether it be on each other or staff. And bingo, why did that happen? But because you change the classification, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. And how many of these, just like I said, to me, this is all a recipe for disaster. How many have been involved in these recent incidences? Bingo. As always, I keep the people that contact me, their information confidential, unless you tell me otherwise. So I won't release the information. But that is a problem, and that is something that has been going on spot on. And again, that's a lot to digest, I know, but I hope you've enjoyed the information that I came out. Next week's podcast, we'll try to come out with a little different survey, a little different poll. But also, if you go to the workinginhell.com website, you'll see the podcast there. If you click in the upper right-hand corner, go to the menu. I added a new page that's for elections. So realize those that are supporting us. We have a new one to show. So we're supporting Jack Moretti for Senate. So you can find his information at www.morettiforsenate.com. That's spelled MORETTIFORSENATE.com. MorettiForSenate.com. We're supporting Jack. We also, as we've seen, we've had Jim Vanberode on. He was a guest at the last podcast. He is at JIMVANBREDERODE.com. So obviously you can find all these at the Working in Hell podcast, the elections have consequences page, and nothing could be further from the truth. Elections have consequences, and we should be talking to and supporting those that support us. And lastly, as was on in 3 podcasts ago, Mark Priori is running for the assembly for those that are in his district, Orchard Park, Lackawanna, South Buffalo. And he is directly involved with HALT every day, as he is a lieutenant for Erie County Corrections. And he is vastly aware of our issues. And all these gentlemen that you find, they're all involved in law enforcement some way. Jim Vanberode was the chief of police at Gates, and then you see Jack Moretti was a state trooper. So all these involved in law enforcement. So there's a common theme. And as you know, specifically for Jim, he's running against Senator Cooney, who was responsible for the passage of HALT. So go to the website at vinnyblasio.com, elections have consequences page. and check out their information directly. And with that, we will leave it there with the podcast today. I want to thank everybody, and I can't thank you enough because without the information, I can't do anything. I'm basically your mouthpiece. You members and officers and civilian staff and all members and people that listen to the podcast and support me. You are the eyes and ears. I don't do any of this without you. You give me the information, and I just speak what most of you can't. As we know that they're the average officer and staff that are working the front lines every day cannot speak for fear of being disciplined. You give me the information, and I just regurgitate what you were saying and thinking. So again, I can't thank you enough, and I depend on you for the information and messages that keep me going through getting out our podcast information, and then obviously the other ways that we use to try to advocate for your issues and make prison as much as it can be a safer place and get rid of some of these crazy things that are getting you hurt and mandated every day. So with much respect, everyone be safe. And as I try to remember to close on every podcast, just remember to be kind to the person next to you. You do not know what they are going through, especially today's day and age with the time that everybody's spending away from family and missing a lot of things. A lot of people are going through a lot, and the high level of assaults is just taking a toll on our law enforcement community, not just in corrections, but everywhere. So be kind. And with that, I thank you. And this is Working in Hell Working in Hell podcast. And the podcast can be found on all your major platforms. This is Vinny Blasio saying thank you and have a good day.
You've been listening to the Working in Hell podcast with Vinny Blasio. Find this podcast on any of your favorite platforms like Audible, iHeart, and Spotify. And be sure to check out www.workinginhell.com for more information and important links. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.